This week, Shitty Gatwa is far too busy to be in Doctor Who. But don't worry, Ruby Sunday is back. And she faces the most scariest Doctor Who monster yet. Podcasters! Today we're talking about the 4th episode of the latest series of Doctor Who, Lucky Day. Is Doctor Who having its lucky day, or is this season really good? Let's start off with talking about Doctor Who as a whole at the moment. I'm really enjoying this series as it goes along, which is really exciting. I thought the Robot Revolution was fine, but as we've gone on, these have been really good episodes of Doctor Who, and I think this is yet another really great addition to the Russell T Davies 2 era. I was really hesitant last week about Ruby Sunday coming back, and I would like to apologise to Ruby Sunday because I implied subtly that I did not like her. I hate Ruby Sunday. But this episode, I think Ruby is really great, and I like what they try and do with her story and her character. But we'll go into that a bit more later. I think one thing I want to talk about before we get into it is that this is yet another Dr. Light episode. Now, for those who don't know what a Dr. Light episode is, it's a story where the Doctor doesn't appear much in it. And they do this for a production reason. It means that they can use Ncuti on a different episode. So they were recording Robot Revolution at the same time they were recording this episode. So it makes a really good way of getting more episodes done in a shorter production block. So it makes sense. And I understand why they do this. And they started doing it back in the David Tennant era. I loved that format because you could tell stories that weren't typical Doctor Who stories. But the problem I have with it in the Russell T Davies 2 era is that instead of getting 12 episodes a season like we did back in the David Tennant times, we're only getting 8. So when the Doctor doesn't appear in 1 or 2 episodes in a season, we're really getting less and less of his Doctor. And I think at this point, you know what, we're 14 episodes in for Ncuti's tenure. We don't really get much time with him. Let's compare it to like Christopher Eccleston. He had, 12 episodes in his first season, 12, 13. Basically got the same amount of episodes and it's been a season and a half. And even in these 14 episodes, he barely appears in 3 of them. 73 Yards, he makes the briefest of cameos. Dot and Bubble, he's not really in. And in this one, he's barely in it as well. But his presence is felt throughout the story, but it's still not his show. It doesn't feel like he's the main character. And it feels like Ruby Sunday has had more of a screen presence than him at points, So as much as I love this format and I love this episode, I think it does a disservice to his incarnation. And maybe that's just down to Ncuti being busy. I don't know. But I think it does get the show to thrive without the Doctor being around. Let's talk about Ruby Sunday. Let's talk about her whole journey throughout this episode. This is something that I've always wanted Doctor Who to do and do it more often. What is it like leaving the Doctor? How do you go back to normal life? How do you go back to paying taxes and, stuff like that? It would be so strange to be in a situation where it's fight or flight every single week and then all of a sudden you're home. And this story does a great job at showing this sort of PTSD of traveling with the Doctor. She loved the Doctor, she had a great time, but also it was seeing the world destroyed. It was seeing people die. And if you've ever seen someone die, it's a really horrible experience and it's something you don't forget. But imagine seeing that every single day traveling with the Doctor. You may see amazing planets and beautiful things, but there's also that darkness and that horribleness that's you can't just get over. And seeing her throughout the story being on edge. The only thing she really trusts is Conrad, and we find out that's a terrible mistake. Her revelation of finding out who Conrad is really horrible. And I think that's why I like Ruby so much in this episode, because you really see her go through it. And you get to see the type of person she is. You're seeing her trying to be the Doctor and how she can't. You're seeing her try to build a romantic relationship with someone and it goes terribly. She's really trying to set herself up for a new life after the Doctor and she doesn't know how to do it. And I like at the end of it, there isn't like I'm fixed now. It's like, I need some time by myself to figure out what to do with my life. And I think that was the smart decision. I thought it was interesting seeing Ruby's family again. I like her extended family and how they work as a good dynamic, but it just goes to show that Ruby's biological mom has absolutely nothing to do in this show. Like, she's just kind of there, and it's really awkward. But I do enjoy Ruby's mum and Nan. I think they're really fun characters. You know, looking through his Instagram profile and stuff like that, it's just really funny, and that stuff is really sweet. Even though it's not a big central point of the story, it's nice to see a little bit of it. But okay, let's move on to what the crux of this story is. We're talking about Conrad. Now, we all know the type of person Conrad is. You know, he is a conspiracy theorist who is using social media to gain a platform to create a movement based on disinformation and lies in order to make himself feel like a bigger man. We all know this type of guy. We've met these people. When you're having a conversation at a party and they just start going on and everyone is just like fighting back the eye rolls and just want to get out of that scenario because no one likes this guy. But somehow he always ends up there out of obligation, or he just invites himself. We all know this man. This could have easily been like a 2D cardboard cutout character. He could have just been, I'm evil, but we don't get that. We get a really nuanced person. And I think that's why Conrad works. Even from that early scene where his mum is like saying, stop lying. You know, we're putting the seeds in there that he is a liar. And then, you know, she hits him. You know, this is a person that's a not very happy relationship going on there. This is not a happy childhood for this guy. And throughout the first half, we're getting little hints that he's up to no good. You know, we're seeing that this guy there's something wrong. There's a few red flags. There were two big moments that stood out to me. The first was in the flashback segment where, you know, he sees the TARDIS again as he's older and he follows the Doctor and Ruby into this warehouse. And instead of going up to the Doctor and saying, oh, I remember you when I was a kid, he decides to take a photo of Ruby and post it online. There's something odd about that interaction. Why didn't he just say, hi, I just got slimed. Can you help me? It's clear that he's up to something, but not enough to make you think, oh, he's a bad guy. And then later on, we see Ruby and Conrad after their first date, and there's a light flickering in the taxi, and it gives you a hint. It's like, well, wouldn't he have taken the antidote by now? So if it's following him, and we know that's a visual cue that the flashing lights means that the shriek is after him, why is it doing it now? What's going on? So there's little visual cues and little hints throughout the story saying there's something up with this guy, but we're not going to give you enough to actually doubt him. And that's what makes this story really well written. Another little hint as well on the rewatch that I noticed was, you know, the guy from Unit was listening to his podcast, the guy who collaborates with him later on, you know, Jordan Lang. And I thought that was smart. There's a little visual cues, there's little ones throughout the story to say, actually, there's something wrong with this guy, but we're not going to tell you really. Because throughout the first half, he seems really charming and sweet and nerdy and cute. And I liked him. I really did. I thought he was a nice guy. And that's another thing as well. This story is trying to talk about the nice guy. You know, that guy who is pretending to be what Ruby wants in order to get something from her. You know, a lot of people do this where they put on a fake persona in order to convince someone to be interested in them. And eventually that has really dire consequences. And it just reminds me that I have really bad taste in men and I need to start really figuring it out. This story isn't really subtle with its political messaging, but there is some little things like, you know, how he didn't take the antidote. You know, there's a bit of like an anti-vax callback there, you know. You're seeing little hints about who this guy is. Going back to the flashback, I think this is a really good example of this story could have worked for any companion from the past of Doctor Who. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. You know, after you leave the Doctor, it is very traumatic. So this could have been a flashback to Yaz and the 13th Doctor. It could have been a flashback to Tegan and the 5th Doctor. You know, these people who have left the Doctor, and how do you live with your life after that? What does that look like? But it works with it being Ruby in the story, but this could have been pretty much any companion depending on what they wanted to do. Ncuti's dynamic with Ruby is so different to his with Belinda. You know, it is a very different feeling. You know, it's a lot more like haha, funny. And I think I prefer Belinda and the Doctor because it feels more mature and they feel more like equals. I love the scene of their first date where Ruby is talking about what that shriek do. And the lights are flickering and we're seeing little glimpses of it in the background. I think it's just a really beautifully done scene and it looks so expensive. Doctor Who looks so rich at the moment. It looks like they have an endless budget. It just looks great. And I love the design of the shriek. I think they look good. And I like that there's the blend of practical and CGI together to create this monster. And I think that's the best way of doing it because you get the benefits of this feels real, but also the believability that CGI can give it as well. And that movement that a practical costume can't achieve. So let's move on to the reveal of Conrad being a bad guy. This surprised me when I first watched it. I wasn't expecting it. When the fake shrieks stand up and you realize they're not alien, that was shocking. But then finding out that Conrad was behind it was a double shock. And I like when they do stuff like that where it's like, you see a reveal, but then there's another one, which is worse. And Ruby's reaction to it, and even Kate Stewart's reaction to it, where it's like, wow, they got me, gal. There's something bigger going on here. This is a guy who has been planning this for a long time. He's got this podcast, he's got this Instagram profile of this person who seems interested in this type of stuff, but it's crazier than what it seems. He's been playing the long game and his plan feels so cruel. Ruby's gone through a lot this year, but it's just even worse. She really trusts him. She was ready to be like, you're my boyfriend and stuff like that. And he played along with it. This dirty dog. Because I remember in the pub, it was Ruby's turn to buy the round and then she gets out of it and I was like, you dirty dog. But knowing that all of his friends were up to no good, good job, Ruby. Good job, get out of there. Make them pay for your drinks. And as this story goes on, we're seeing what Conrad is really up to. He's trying to build this brand around himself. He's trying to build this movement. And the whole story becomes about what is truth and what isn't. We're talking about people who are inventing their own realities. Even if the truth is right in front of their face, it's about creating your own. But before we go into the final act and stuff like that, let's talk about Kate Stewart and UNIT as a whole. I think this story shows Kate at her best. I think this is the most I've enjoyed Kate, and that's because she is a morally grey character throughout this. She is making decisions that we usually wouldn't see because the Doctor's around. Because really in the final half, it really becomes Kate's story. Because for Kate, this is all about protecting UNIT, everything it stands for, and she makes it very clear, she's like, if UNIT doesn't exist, and this technology goes in the hands of dictators, it could mean the end of the world. So she has real motivation to stop this guy. And it's personal for her. As soon as he's coming up the elevator, she's making a decision, we need to confront this man or this is it. This guy has the power to topple everything and everything could be an absolute nightmare. And I think this is where we see Gemma Redgrave's best performance in the show because she gets to take on the role as the main character. And it feels like they're doing this on purpose because War Between the Land and the Sea, she's going to be probably the lead character of that show. And so it's good to see her have that moment where she's taking charge because we want to see what type of leader is she when the Doctor's not around. And in this, we see that demonstrated really well. She becomes a morally grey character. And it very much reminds me of Captain Jack in Torchwood and how different he is in Doctor Who. In Doctor Who, he toes the line, he does what the Doctor tells him to do. But in Torchwood, he'll do anything to get what he needs to get done. He will kill people. That's the type of person he is. And to see Kate Stewart do a very similar thing makes it more interesting. And I think this is the first time we're really seeing the Brigadier and using that reference and that connection to him being her father actually have emotional weight to it and actually affect the plot. He's accusing the Brigadier of being a lie. He's accusing her dad of being a liar. And she obviously really reacts to that. And when he points a gun at Ruby and she's like, don't point a gun at her, you really feel that. That is a really strong performance. And when she makes that decision to open the gate and she's like, the Doctor wouldn't do this and he wouldn't agree with it, but I'm doing it because you need to learn. You need to see the consequences of your lies. And the best thing about this is that he doesn't learn. He doesn't learn. Even when it's in his face, even when he doesn't even believe his own lies, he has to. Because that's the type of person we're dealing with here. Because he's built his whole life around a lie. Around so many lies that he can't even keep up with these lies. He is completely in his own reality that to question it means that everything has to be start from scratch. And you can't fix a man like this. This is the person he is. There is no changing, even when it's right in his face and Kate's ready to let him die. And we even seen earlier in that scene where he killed Jordan Lang, that unit person that was helping him. And Kate's like, you killed him. And he's like, oh, he was an actor, or he wasn't even real. He never existed. You can invent that. You can invent anything because what is the truth? It's just words. And if you say it enough, it becomes reality. But the thing about Doctor Who is that it's still a family show. You can't have Kate Stewart killing the hell out of this guy on international television. You just can't. That's not the type of show this is. So you still have Ruby, who has been hurt by this guy, trying to help him get out. She wants to help him because she still cares, because she's still a good person. We know what the companions' morals are. They have to align with the Doctor's, but you can have Kate who can be a bit more morally ambiguous. And the shriek is like right in his face and Kate's like, how committed are you to your lies? What do you truly believe? To get to the point where he finally says, you're right, I'm lying, yada, yada, yada. And Ruby gives the shriek a big old electric shock. And you're like, okay, cool, he's learnt his lesson. But as soon as he stands up, he still goes back to his old narrative of, well, these special effects are great. And then his arm gets bitten off. And that's what I love about this episode. Because they could have easily given him a redemption arc and then he was like, oh, I learnt my lesson, you're right, unit's real. And then, he changed his movement to be one of positivity and light. And that would have just been horrible. And it would have been inauthentic and so fake, which is what grounds this episode. It makes it feel more real in the fact that he still goes back to his lies at the end of the day because he can't look back. He can't self-reflect because he doesn't want to. He's not interested in changing. This is the type of man he is. I think one issue I have with this story is the portrayal of Unit. This is something that Pete McTighe seems to have in common with his episode Kablam, where the story seems to critique the terrorist character, but doesn't seem to critique the actual institutions that he is against. Although it's clear that Conrad is a terrible person and he's inventing lies and stuff like that, but Unit as an organization should be open to criticism. This one person, Kate, is an unelected official who seems to have unlimited power, and that is something that should be up for debate. Even in this episode, Kate's like, if a dictator got hold of this technology, that could be the end of the world. Well, what makes Kate the right hands? Why is Kate the right person to be in charge of all of this technology? What makes her special? What makes her politically neutral? Because she isn't politically neutral, she is a person, all people are. All people have thoughts, feelings, and emotions, allegedly. And, it's like, why is she the one? Is it because Unit as an organization has very specific rules? Is it a United Nations, NATO type of thing where like a lot of people have to vote? Because it doesn't seem that way. It seems like Kate has carte blanche, that she can do whatever she likes. So it makes it interesting. How much power does Unit have? And is it justified? Because that's something the story doesn't go into. But then again, Unit is a fictional company that doesn't exist in the real world, so you can't really critique it in the same way you would as a real life counterpart. But I think it's interesting that we're getting a really nuanced portrayal of Conrad, but we're not really getting the same with Unit. So I think at the end of the day, maybe it's the right decision to just focus on Conrad, and because it was such a nuanced performance and a nuanced role. And if we took away from that and put it into critiquing Unit, maybe it just would have been overbloated. But I just think it's interesting that after Kablam and this, Pete McTighe doesn't really seem to be the type of writer who wants to critique powerful organizations and thinks they're doing the right thing. And I think that's an interesting parallel to make. So let's talk about that final scene in the TARDIS, where you've got the Doctor encountering Conrad and having that big conversation. This scene, I feel really 50-50 about. On the one hand, I really enjoy Ncuti's performance, and I like a lot of the dialogue in it. Where the Doctor's talking about like, I'm fighting every single day to protect everyday people who are just trying to get through. And then there's people like you who just keep going on and on and on about just complete lies and weaponizing these lies and trying to make a name for yourself and make it all about you so you can feel important. And I like all that type of stuff and I like what it's trying to say. But on the other hand, it does feel like, look, this episode's political messaging is very, very clear. It is very obvious what this story is about. I don't think we needed another scene to beat us over the head with it. It's very clear. This is about alt-right people who are weaponizing lies and making these horrible movements that's actually affecting the world. It's affecting democracy. It's affecting people being safe. And it's having real consequences, and they're affecting real people's lives. And that's why people like this are dangerous, because it's making everyday people who are just trying to live their life get weaponized for nothing. And it's frustrating. And that's what the story is about. And we know that. Do we need another scene where we have the doctor saying, this is bad? It's like, we know. I still think it worked as a scene, and I think it was well performed. And then we see Mrs. Flood again as some jail guard, and she says she's the governor, which to me means that she must be Governor Hensel from Power of the Daleks. I'm calling it. That's my guess. That's my number one guess. So I'm looking forward to seeing Governor Hensel again in the finale. Bring it on. But overall, I'm enjoying this season. I'm enjoying it a lot more than last. I missed Belinda this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing her again. I think Millie did a decent job with this episode, and I'm enjoying Ruby Sunday more. I love Kate Stewart in this. I think this is Gemma's best performance, and she's given real stuff to do. She's given a real script, and she really knew that, and she nailed it. You know, you can tell that she is going for it. I love the idea of Unit falling for a trap by these conspiracy theorists. I think that's great. That reveal is really shocking, and Kate's reaction to it is brilliant. And I like seeing Shirley Ann Bingham. I didn't talk about her in this episode, but it's great to see her back. I wish there was more cohesiveness. I want to see the same Unit characters every single time, so we get to really get to know these people. So it's great that she's back, and I hope that she continues to make appearances. I like that we got to see Kate consider letting this man die. It's great to see that morally grey side, and I like to see Doctor Who explore that every now and then. They still make the morally correct thing by letting him live. You know, that's Doctor Who. That's the message the show has. It's endless positivity, so at the end of the day, that's what they have to do. But it's good that they can play with that. They can tease it, and they think, oh, are we going to let them live? Or how far is Kate willing to go? And I liked that. And ultimately, the betrayal of Conrad is really nuanced and really good, and it's believable. And showing this man who is creating his own reality and how people are following him and what that means. And I think that's really powerful. I think there is room to criticize Unit in there, but I think maybe there wasn't enough time in this episode alone. But either way, it looks like Conrad's story is far from being all over. He's teaming up with Mrs. Flood, maybe in some Avengers Endgame type of nonsense, I don't know. So we'll see where that goes. And ultimately, it felt like a Torchwood story. No doctor, showcasing the worst of humanity, morally grey decisions, and it's just the type of storytelling that I really resonate with, and I really, really enjoyed this one. But yeah, I'm sure the comment section is going to be really fun in this video. So yeah, let me know what you think of this episode in the comment section below. I'm probably going to avoid the comment section this time around just because it is such a politically charged episode. And honestly, I don't really feel like I want to interact with those people. Because, you know, like this episode showed, you know, interacting with these people, they're not going to change their mind. I'm not interested in debating these people because they've invented their own reality. And they're entitled to it. And I don't have to engage with it, you know? But yeah, have fun in the comment section. Be careful, guys. Don't get too upset about this one. End of the day, it's just an episode of Doctor Who, and I will see you next week. All right, bye guys. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Nair's YouTube channel.